You know, there's a specific kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when you've worked 48 hours in a 3-day span. A heaviness that feels less like sleepiness and more like gravity just turned up the dial on you personally. That was Jackson Miller's reality at 1:45 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday in Seattle. Sitting in a booth at the Rusty Anchor, nursing a coffee that tasted like battery acid and burnt hopes. But hey, it was $1.50 and the refills were free. Jocks was 35, an ex-Marine with a shoulder that still screamed when the rain hit it right. Raising a 7-year-old girl named Lily on a budget that was tighter than a snare drum. We're talking about the kind of math where you have to decide between fixing the heater in the truck or paying for a dental checkup. And the truck usually loses. He sat there, staring at the steam rising from the mug, trying to mentally calculate if he could pick up an extra shift at the warehouse without his knees finally giving out. Just listening to the rain hammer against the glass, it was his 15 minutes of peace. The only quiet he'd get before starting his graveyard security shift down at the docks. The diner was mostly empty, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft scuff of shoes on linoleum coming from the waitress, a girl named Ellie who had been working the night shift for about 3 months. Now Jax was a guy who noticed things habit from the service. You don't stop scanning the perimeter just because you're a civilian, and he'd noticed. Ellie wasn't your typical diner waitress. There was a precision to the way she moved, a politeness that felt learned in a finishing school rather than a truck stop. And she never complained, never rushed him. Even when he nursed that single cup for an hour. What Jocks didn't know, what nobody in that grease-stained diner knew, was that Ellie was actually Elena Sterling, the sole heiress to the Sterling tech empire. A woman who could buy the entire city block without checking her bank balance, but who was currently scrubbing tables because she was desperate to feel something real, to escape the suffocating bubble of boardrooms and fake smiles and understand the world her father's technology was supposed to be serving. The peace broke the moment the door chimed, bringing in a gust of cold wind and the overpowering scent of expensive cologne as Preston Vance walked in with 2 of his buddies. Preston was a hedge fund manager, the kind of guy who wore $3,000 suits to dive bars just to feel superior. A man who treated life like a buffet where he could take whatever he wanted. He slid into the booth next to Jocks, laughing loudly about some merger, and snapped his fingers at Elena like she was a golden retriever, yelling, "Hey, sweetheart, coffee, black. And try not to spill it this time, yeah?" Jocks watched Elena stiffen, saw her take a breath and put on that professional mask, walking over with the pot saying, "Coming right up, sir." But when she reached for his cup, Preston's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist hard, his fingers digging into her skin, his face twisting into a sneer that made Jocks's stomach turn. "You know," Preston drawled, his voice slurring slightly with expensive scotch, "you're too pretty to be scrubbing tables. How about you ditch the apron and come show us a good time? I promise it pays better than this dump." The diner went silent, dead silent, the kind of silence where you can hear a heartbreak. The cook in the back froze. A couple of truckers looked down at their plates. Nobody wanted trouble with a guy who clearly had lawyers on speed dial. But Jocks felt that old familiar heat rising in his chest. Not anger exactly, but a cold, sharp clarity. He saw the panic in Elena's eyes, the way she tried to pull back but couldn't. And he didn't see a billionaire's daughter. He saw a woman being cornered. And he saw a bully who needed a lesson in manners. Jax stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. And he didn't rush, he just walked over with that slow, rolling gait of a man who has walked through worse things than a diner brawl. His voice low and raspy as he said, "I think the lady wants her hand back." Preston looked up, blinking like he couldn't believe the interruption, scanning Jocks's faded flannel shirt, the oil stains on his jeans, the tired eyes, and he laughed a cruel, barking sound. "Excuse me? Do you know who I am, pal?" I could buy your entire existence with the change in my pocket. So why don't you sit your broke ass down and mind your business? It became my business when you put your hands on her, Jack said, and he stepped closer, entering Preston's personal space, radiating the kind of danger that money can't buy. Now let her go. Preston sneered, his ego writing a check his skills couldn't cash. And he signaled to his friend, a beefy guy in a leather jacket, who stood up to shove Jax, but it was over before it started. Jax pivoted, a simple, efficient movement drilled into him over a decade of service, catching the guy's arm, using his own momentum to spin him around and pin him against the booth, not hurting him, just immobilizing him with a grip like iron. Nobody needs to get hurt tonight, Jax said. His eyes locked on Preston. But you are going to let go of her. You are going to pay for your coffee, and you are going to leave. Preston, realizing he was outmatched in the physical department, let go of Elena's wrist. She stumbled back, rubbing the red marks, looking at Jax with wide, shocked eyes, and stood up, adjusting his suit with trembling hands, his face purple with humiliation. You're going to regret this, Preston spat, pulling out his phone to record Jax's face. You're done in this town, trash. I'll have you arrested for assault. I'll ruin you. Do what you gotta do, Jax said calmly, sitting back down at his table and picking up his coffee. Just do it outside. The police arrived 20 minutes later. And of course, it was a mess. Preston played the victim, talking about unprovoked aggression from a deranged veteran. And while the cops didn't arrest Jax thanks to Alana's statement, the damage was done because Preston posted the video edited, of course, to cut out the part where he grabbed Elena, showing only Jax pinning the friend. By the time Jax finished his shift at the docks the next morning, the video had 50,000 views, titled "Psycho Vet Attacks Businessman," and his phone was blowing up with a text from his boss at the security firm saying, "Don't bother coming in tonight, too much liability." Jax went home to his tiny apartment, the one with the peeling wallpaper and the crayon drawings covering the cracks, and he just sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, wondering how he was going to tell Lily that Daddy lost another job, wondering if doing the right thing was always going to cost him everything. 2 days later, there was a knock at his door, a timid, soft knock, and when Jax opened it, expecting a landlord or a process server, he found Elena standing there, not in her waitress uniform, but in jeans and a sweater, holding a box of muffins and looking terrified. I found your address from the diner's log," she stammered. "I wanted to thank you. And I wanted to tell you the truth." She stepped inside, her eyes widening at the smallness of his life, the folded flag on the mantel, the stack of overdue bills on the counter, the sheer discipline it took to keep this place running, and she took a breath and dropped the bomb. "My name isn't Ellie, it's Elena Sterling. My father is Arthur Sterling." Jax just stared at her, the name registering instantly. Arthur Sterling was the tech giant of Seattle, the man who practically owned the skyline, and he let out a short, dry laugh. "So, I got fired for protecting a billionaire's daughter who was playing dress-up? It wasn't a game to me," Elena said fiercely, tears pricking her eyes. "I needed to know what it was like to be invisible. And you saw me, Jax. You were the only one who saw me as a person, not a paycheck." She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. "I want to help. Let me pay your rent. Let me fix this." "Put that away," Jax said, his voice hard. "I didn't help you for money, and I'm not taking a handout now. I did it because men like that don't get to do what they want just because they have a thick wallet. If I take your money, it makes everything I did cheap." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and realized she was standing in the presence of a kind of integrity she had never encountered in her father's world, a man who had nothing but his honor and refused to sell it. "Then let me help another way," she pleaded. "Preston is suing you. He's coming after you. My father's lawyers are the best. I'll handle my own battles, Jock said, opening the door for her. You go back to your world, Elena. It's safer there. But Preston Vance wasn't done. He was a petty, vindictive man who couldn't stand the idea of losing face to a security guard, so he escalated. He hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on Jax, hoping to find a criminal record, a drug problem. Anything, but all he found was a record of service. A dead wife and a man working himself to death for his kid. Frustrated, Preston decided to play dirty. Jax was walking Lily to school a week later when he noticed a black sedan following them, crawling along the curb, and when he got home, there was an envelope taped to his door. Inside were photos of Lily at the playground, Lily at the bus stop, and a note that said, "Apologize publicly and settle the lawsuit, or things get complicated." That was the moment the sadness left Jax's body and was replaced by the cold, tactical fury of a father whose cub is being hunted. He walked into his apartment, locked the door, and took a deep breath, realizing that taking the high road doesn't work when you're dealing with snakes in the grass. He called the only person who might understand, not the police, who were already skeptical, but Elena. "I need to talk to your father," Jock said when she answered. "Not for money, but because this guy just threatened my daughter. And if I handle this my way, I'm going to end up in prison for the rest of my life." Arthur Sterling was a man who lived in a tower of glass and steel, isolated from the world by layers of assistance and security. But when his daughter marched into his office with a scruffy ex-Marine in tow, he put down his tablet. Elena explained everything: the diner, the assault, the viral video, the stalking, and Arthur listened, his face unreadable, his eyes shifting from his daughter's passionate defense to the stoic man standing by the door. "You refused my daughter's money," Arthur said, his voice gravelly. "Why?" "Because my dignity is the only thing I have left to give my daughter," Jock said, meeting the billionaire's gaze without flinching. "But this guy, Preston, he's crossed a line. He's targeting my kid. And I need this to stop. I don't care about me. But nobody touches Lily." Arthur Sterling looked at the file his own head of security had compiled on Jock's the combat medals, the spotless record, the 3 jobs, and then he looked at the file on Preston Vance, seeing the text messages, the bribery attempts, the sheer rot of the man. A slow smile spread across Arthur's face, a smile that terrified his competitors. "Preston Vance is attending my gala tomorrow night," Arthur said softly. "He's trying to secure a partnership with my firm. He thinks he's untouchable because he controls the narrative." Arthur stood up and walked over to Jock's, extending a hand. "Mr. Miller, I think it's time we change the narrative. Are you up for one more security shift?" The Sterling Tech Gala was the event of the year. A sea of tuxedos and diamonds, champagne flowing like water. And Preston Vance was right in the middle of it, holding court, bragging about how he cleaned up the streets by getting that thug fired. He felt invincible, surrounded by his sycophants, until the lights dimmed and Arthur Sterling took the stage. "Welcome, everyone," Arthur's voice boomed. "Tonight is about the future. But before we look forward, we must look at who we are right now." On the massive screen behind Arthur, a video began to play, but it wasn't a tech demo. It was high-definition footage from the diner. Not the grainy security cam, but footage recovered and enhanced by Sterling's forensic team from a different angle, showing clearly, undeniably, Preston grabbing Elena, sneering, the aggression, the entitlement. The audio was crystal clear. "You're too pretty to be scrubbing tables," the ballroom gasped. Preston froze, his champagne glass slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. "The man who posted the edited video claiming to be a victim is standing right there." Arthur pointed a finger at Preston, who was now illuminated by a spotlight, shrinking under the glare. "And the man he tried to destroy. The man who protected my daughter when nobody else would." Jock stepped out from the wings of the stage. wearing a suit Arthur had provided, looking uncomfortable but standing tall. "Is Jackson Miller," Arthur continued. "A man of honor." Preston tried to run, scrambling toward the exit, but was met by two uniformed officers, and this time, they had the full, unedited evidence and a warrant for stalking and harassment. The room erupted in murmurs, phones raised to capture the real story. The truth finally cutting through the noise, but the story didn't end there. Because as the applause died down and the gala ended, Jacques found himself standing on the balcony with Arthur and Elena, looking out over the city lights. "The lawsuit is gone," Arthur said, lighting a cigar. "My legal team buried him. He'll be lucky if he manages a lemonade stand when they're done." He turned to Jacques. "I have a new division launching. Project Aegis. It's a community safety initiative, protecting the vulnerable, training civilians to de-escalate violence. I need someone to run it, someone who knows that protecting people isn't about power. It's about character." "I'm not a corporate guy," Jacques said, looking at his rough hands. "I know," Arthur smiled. "That's why I'm offering you the job. 90,000 a year, full benefits, and your daughter gets a scholarship to the Sterling Academy." Jacques looked at Elena, who was smiling with tears in her eyes. And he thought about Lily, about the leaky roof, about the fear of the mailbox. Jacques looked at Elena, who was smiling with tears in her eyes, and he thought about Lily, about the leaky roof, about the fear of the mailbox, and for the first time in years, the knot in his chest loosened. "I'll take it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I still want my Tuesday nights off. The coffee at the Rusty Anchor is terrible, but I've got a favorite booth." 6 months later, the rain was still falling in Seattle, but the world looked different for Jackson Miller. He wasn't hunched over a cup of coffee trying to survive the night. He was walking into the community center downtown, wearing a jacket that said Aegis Director. He wasn't just training security guards. He was teaching regular people teachers, nurses, bus drivers, how to stand up, how to intervene, how to be the person who doesn't look away. He walked into his office, and there, sitting in the corner doing her homework, was Lily. She looked up, beaming. "Daddy, are we still going for pizza?" "You bet, kiddo," Jacques grinned. Elena walked in a moment later. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was running the foundation side of the business, using her name to open doors that had been shut to people like Jacques for too long. "Ready to go?" she asked. "Yeah," Jacques said. He paused by the door, looking at a framed photo on the wall. It was a picture of him and Elena at the diner, taken by a regular on that fateful night, blurry and dark, but showing him standing between her and the bully. Underneath it, Arthur had engraved a small plaque. "Courage is fear holding on a minute longer." They walked out into the rain, the three of them, and Jacques realized that he hadn't just saved a waitress that night. He had saved himself. He had proven that even when the world tries to crush you, even when the rich and powerful try to rewrite the truth, integrity is the one thing they can't buy. And it's the one thing they can't take away, Dad. So here's the thing I want you to take away from this story, folks. We live in a world that loves to worship money, status, and power. We scroll through feeds of people living perfect lives, and it's easy to feel small. Easy to feel like doing the right thing doesn't matter because the bad guys seem to win anyway. Preston Vance thought he won because he had the suit and the bank account. But he forgot that when you strip all that away, all you're left with is who you are in the dark. Jacques was a hero not because he fought a guy, but because he refused to sell out. He refused to let his daughter see him compromise. How many times have you been in a situation where you saw something wrong, maybe at work, maybe on the street, and you felt that pull to say something, but you swallowed it down because you didn't want the trouble? We've all been there. It's scary. But imagine if we all decided, just once, to be like Jacques, to be the person who says, "Not today." What would you have done? Would you have taken the 50 grand to walk away? Would you have stood up in that diner? It's a hard question, I know. Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever stood up for someone and paid the price for it? Or have you ever wished you had? Let's talk about it. And hey, if you like this story, if you believe that good people still finish first sometimes, do me a favor and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs a reminder to keep fighting the good fight. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay kind, and watch each other's backs.